Hello, I'm James Lawson, and I'm a Celtic fisherman active in the commercial fleet. I started with salmon when I was 13, and I've fished 10 different species now. And I run a seine boat in the summer, and I just purchased my own smaller boat for prawns and geoducks. I do my best to be involved and sat on the Wild Salmon Advisory Council, and I'm on the Harvest Committee for Salmon Seine, as well as being on the steering committee for the BC Young Fishermen's Network. There are a lot of pertinent issues in fisheries we face as harvesters. It's overwhelming to think about it all at once, but it's a little bit easier to organize the problems for me when I relate each problem back to different forms of access. When I think of any problem, I can categorize it into at least one form of access. First off, there needs to be a healthy stock of a specific species available to access before a fishery is even considered. But sometimes
He's a fisherman, that's what he's doing. Fisherman first.
Not a speaker. Okay, sometimes there's a limitation or lack of existing testing programs that hinders the availability of science to draw management decisions from. There can be no access to something without baseline science and a precautionary management framework. Growing non-equitable monitoring across sectors makes it even harder to get baseline harvest rates that inform later decisions. A creel survey for sports fishing simply is not the same as dockside validation or on-site observers. Then we have to consider habitat degradation from other interests such as resource industry, inland or fish farms, and natural factors like climate change. Climate change in and of itself can manifest as new migration patterns, suboptimal survival, and new food balances. So the species in question may already be suffering, and I know in my own case it blows my mind that despite all the human-driven detriment to species, we are willing to go ahead with enhancement like ocean ranching or more hatcheries to boost the numbers. Throwing weak stock management on top of that just adds insult to injury. The coast is no longer a pristine environment, and it's painfully obvious to me that in salmon, that enhancement is of paramount importance, not just as a socio-economic driver, but of conservation. Unfortunately, rivers don't belong to the salmon anymore, that is man's playground. So if the stock is there, we can proceed to making a science-based management plan aimed at sustainability. Decades have been spent forming modern approaches to sustainable fisheries management, and then we get some curveballs thrown our way like a rushed NPA process. If we aren't going to run with complex and effective management measures already existing in the IFMPs, then it makes sense that we at least take the time to do the NPAs right the first time. The entire process feels rushed, like we want to do it so we can say we did it, not so that we can say we're meeting the intended goals. People like Jim are trying to tackle this monumental task, but for a task this large, I think more time is better. Questionable high-level decisions like this can be devastating to us in other ways as well. How come trollers can't fish Chinook off high to at the same time sport fishers do? We both hook in line, and I'm going to assume a career troller is more efficient at shaping spring with the least possible damage than somebody trying to take a picture of their trophy fish on a little dinghy. Or how come a seiner has spent so much time honing selective fishing methods through brailing, but when it comes down to it, we need to selectively fish around stocks of concern like steelhead or coho, we are denied the opportunity. But what hurts even more is having a solid, sustainable fisheries management plan in place and having somebody like Pacific Wild totally discredit it and make calls for a closure based purely on misinformed public opinion. I get to see that particular management plan through the lenses of harvest, test fish, and spawn survey, and I commend the minister on ignoring the naysayers and going ahead with the fishery based on science. It's not like they're providing any peer-reviewed science of their own. Okay, so we have a stock, we have a plan. And now your user group has to get allocation alongside allocations across borders and to other countries and other domestic user groups like, inland fisheries, FSC, and the rec sector. And now licensure is necessary to access the stock for commercial fishing purposes. But with the management policy in place, you don't necessarily have to be commercially fishing to gain that access. Licenses are being sold out of country, and domestic investors who may own licenses or quota but don't necessarily fish them. That in itself reduces harvester access by virtue of there being less for sale at inflated costs. The way the lease system is set up, a boat owner is more likely to lose their small business than a leaseholder because they take on the bulk of this bodily and financial risks associated with fishing. It might even be a headache if you want a license and you have the means, but it's married to another license you don't want. Or if you're First Nations and you might get frustrated with having a license in the PICTI program, but you can't access it because it's going straight to the free market instead. But naturally, a license isn't everything you need to harvest. You need a specific set of skills, certifications, and people willing to take care of the necessary equipment. Intergenerational knowledge is key, but it's getting harder and harder to find somebody to pass that knowledge on to. The fleet is gray and there are a few new entrants. It's hard to convince somebody to fish for a career with so much uncertainty surrounding the occupation. How are new entrants supposed to get new licenses when costs are so high, or when you can't get one specific license to start because it's married to another? There isn't much option right now to turn to the lease market, which isn't exactly ideal. And it's really frustrating when somebody is sitting at home collecting a paycheck sizably bigger than yours for doing dirty work. It's not always the case, but too often it is. And once a fish is aboard, you need to sell it to an appropriate market. We're experiencing market problems right now, such as the Chinese market largely being shut down and shutting down fisheries with it. I'm supposed to be out geoduck duck diving, but there's no market, so there's no work. Without a backup in other countries or domestic market, that's just the way it is. But when we do fish, of course, we compete with other providers like inland fisheries, farm seafood products, and other countries harvesting the same species. And having the product to sell is one thing, but convincing people they should buy your product is another. And once that product is sold, the money has to be distributed. The first payments typically go straight to the lease of the license or quota and other off-the-top expenses like fuel and grub and monitoring. But I contest that it's better left in the business of fishing, exemplified by my own recent experience. So this is a bit long-winded, but as a new boat owner since November, I've spent money on all locally, on fuel, marine electronics stores, Aboriginal funding institutions, trap builders, marine equipment stores, surveyors, mechanics, boat brokers, Fitzroy Marine Safety, Fish Safe BC, dive stores, Staples, garden suppliers, and even one company that makes snaps for dog collars. So tell me cycling that money back into fishing operations isn't important in our local economy. I'm in the business of fishing, and my money flows to other businesses that keep my operation going. That is not necessarily the case for somebody who sees quota as an investment and will walk away with a profit as soon as the product is sold. After all this, contingency plans need to be in place for when the rest of that goes sideways. Diversification is key for fish harvesters these days, and we need to get by when one fishery doesn't go as planned. Despite calls for disaster relief, salmon fishermen never seem to materialize, so we need to find self-sufficient ways to make our own lands meet. So, as a recap to all my ramblings, I found the 8 levels of access are that you need to have a healthy fish stock to access, you need to have a science-based management plan aimed at sustainability, you have to be part of a user group allowed to access the fish, you have to have access to a license, you have to have access to a skilled crew and equipment, and then an appropriate market, and then you have to share that wealth appropriately so that you can keep your crew and all that. And then you have to have contingency plans for when all that goes wrong. So we run into barriers at every level, which makes it tough, but no one told us this was going to be easy as an occupation. And if there's one thing I know about fishermen, is that we're resilient, and that we're really good at complaining about things that ought to be managed differently. And lately we've been focusing our voice and demanding the changes we want. The focal report and the wild salmon plan put forward by the province now exists and need to be pushed into action. The solutions for some of our problems are right in front of us. When we speak as a community instead of individuals, we have power. And seeing a group of diverse individuals and stewards here present today, I think our future is a little bit brighter.